Well, well, well. Look who's here, Carson S. Davis.
And it's Kevin Kittle. Who would have thunk it?
Who would have thought? Boy, we're on a roll.
We've done 3 of these now.
Episode 3, part 1 of It's Not a Meisner podcast. The not part is funny to us. Of course, not means it is. Not is a double negative. So this is the grammar portion of our show.
It's good to hear Kevin talk about grammar. He doesn't even know how to spell his own name.
This is why people tune in, to hear me talk about conjunctions and double negatives. When we say not, obviously that means it is. It is a Meisner podcast, but we'll leave room for things that are not specifically Meisner. And today's episode, episode 3, part 1, is one of those examples. We're going to be talking about a bigger conversation, a bigger topic. The thing is, though, because we kind of filter everything through the lens of Sanford Meisner and his teaching, no matter what we talk about, we're looking at it, how we understand art in general and theater, particularly, and acting specifically. So today's topic is the value of theater and acting in society and in culture. So that sounds like a big topic.
It only stretches centuries.
Centuries, that's all. So, let's get that ball rolling. It should not be acting training. It should be actor training.
Am I a good actor?
Like me doing. It's not a Meisner podcast.
There it is.
Whenever my students start to get a little bit arrogant, a little big-headed about their work, like they lose their humility. Like, I think you have to be humble to do this work. So if they start going on and on about, how great they are or whatever, I will always say to them, listen, don't forget that what you do for a living, it's kind of stupid. It's not even a little bit stupid. It's really kind of...
It's a lot stupid.
It's a lot. I mean, the history of theater, it's filled with people who have said they are actors and they're really good. They have said, oh, I've always had a little bit of embarrassment about doing this for a living. It's what kind of job is this for a grown person, And, I can't remember who it was, but somebody really, really well known, a really good actor, said, what do you do for a living? I make faces. I make faces for a living. Right. Now, of course, it's more than that. But the truth is, the example is, let's say you're in your kitchen and you and your mom are having a big argument, and you go, that's it, Mom, I never want to talk to you again. And you open the door to leave the kitchen, and you step out, you slam the door behind you, and then you look to your left and there's some lady all dressed in black with a headset on, You're like, is that the next door neighbor? No, it's the stage manager. Yeah. Then you look to the right and you notice your kitchen is held up by an A-frame. It's all a little flimsy. And then you're like, wow, shit. And then you hear your cue, right? You open the door, you step back in. And another thing, mother, like, what the hell? This is how we earn our living, It's a little silly.
It's not necessarily a job for a real adult.
Well, yeah, you're operating from your imagination, which is what kids do. It's what children do. And
right.
But the truth is, we're being a little bit silly here by calling it a stupid profession, because if you think about it too hard, it kind of is silly. But it's also the single most important thing you could do.
Right.
I think the single most important thing a human being can do is be an actor. Because, as Aristotle said, anything that makes you think and feel is a very, very important thing, a necessary thing. And that's what theater does. People go to the theater to live through things vicariously so that they can kind of work them out without having to have the actual experience of it, which could be dangerous, Declan Donnellan, who is one of my heroes, wrote, the reason people go to the theater is so that they don't pour Clorox in their children's cereal. Oh, holy shit. right? The reason you go to see Medea kill her kids is because you may have certain primal urges and instincts, impulses. So you go to see a play about that thing, right?
Well, and how about you were telling me that your wife was watching a show and had a reaction to it because you're kind of testing how you would live if you were in that situation.
My wife, God bless her, doesn't like theater. I'm married to her for 50 years. Doesn't like theater, never goes to see my plays that I direct. We were just talking about this before. People hear that, they go, "Oh, your wife doesn't go to see your plays?" And I'd be like, "I don't go watch her teach first grade." She used to be a first grade teacher. Imagine me sitting in her classroom going, "Oh, yeah, you're teaching them to read, huh, dear?" So, she's very supportive, but she really doesn't like theater. However, when she and I are sitting watching a movie at home or a series, a television series, she will start talking about those people and the choices they're doing up there, which means she's 100% connected and living through what's going on there. And it's giving her an opportunity to sound it out, right? She'll say, "Why did they do that?" Or that's the wrong move or whatever. That's a really important function.
I think most people, I don't think you can really help yourself, when you're watching something, especially if it's good.
Oh my God.
You can't help yourself, but ease it out in your mind.
I have a terrible story about that, which we may or may not edit, but I'm going to tell it as gently as I can. A guy told me this about 40 years ago, that there was a play with two characters who were kind of, they were in conflict with each other. One of them was a white guy, one of them was a black guy. And the black guy kept, that horn outside is telling me I shouldn't tell this story. I'm being censored before I tell the story. But he told me that in this play, the black guy kept winning and winning and winning. And finally, at the end of the play, when the tables turned, the white guy was hovering over the black guy. And some guy in the audience jumped up and said, "Kill the N-word." He said the word, not N-word. He said the word. And the entire audience just stopped. This guy outed himself as a racist. And he couldn't stop himself. He jumped up and screamed it. That's how into it he was, right? Now, theater shouldn't exist to out people for their psychopathy, or for their fucking, antisocial and horrific things. But that's an extraordinary example of how that guy was lost in the story and that the story was going against his value system. Like, he did not like to see the order of the way things were going up there. And so he screams out this horrible, horrible, ugly thing. The thing about the reason we do what we do is, well, this is a longer story, but I don't know if I've ever told you this one. Is there a parade going on out there? Is that what's happening? Are we listening to what the hell?
It's we're in New York.
New York. We'll edit all this out, possibly.
No, we won't.
Maybe we won't. Maybe people should know that right outside this wall is a ton of New York City noise, which we love. I don't know. Did I ever tell you this, Carson? That one time I was asked to present an award at a theater.
They asked you.
They asked me, which was the first mistake. It was kind of sweet, though. It was high school, award. It was like, these high school kids worked really hard on their show, and then they got nominated for awards, and, they gave awards out. And they asked me, because I was the head of the BFA program at Rutgers at the time, so I should go and hand out awards to high school kids, whoever. Will is laughing. Our wonderful engineer, Will, is off screen laughing his ass off. But I had the best, also I had the greatest category, best middle school play.
Oh.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade middle school. I mean, isn't that the greatest? They did a play, they worked their asses off, and then they're being recognized for it, which was great. But they said to us, the people who were presenting were all theater professionals, actors who I knew, if actors you would know, because it was in Jersey, and so a lot of Broadway actors and all. They said to us, "Will you go out and just say a few encouraging words, before you present the awards?" Will is like, "Here we go." So everybody went up there and they were doing all those kinds of, follow your dreams and And, always never forget to always remember, all these stupid things, right? Yeah, I mean, they were great and all, but I got up there and I said, for those of you who were nominated tonight and didn't win, it doesn't matter. And everybody was like, yeah. Right. And then I went, and for those of you who are nominated and did win, it doesn't matter. And you could hear a pin drop. I'm looking at these kids holding their awards like, what the fuck? What? And I was like, no, listen to me.
Here's a bit of nihilism.
No. The important thing is it's great that you worked hard and you're being recognized for it. But I would celebrate tonight, then I would go home and take my award and I would put it in the closet. And I would maybe take it out every now and then and remember that you worked hard and did a good job. But don't put it on your mantle. Don't put it on a shelf, because that implies that it's important and that's why you did it. So I said that to this group of high school and middle school kids and their parents. The reason we do theater is not for awards. We do theater because we have a burning need to communicate something. And, Arthur Miller said that he loves Ibsen's plays because Ibsen's plays grab you by the collar and they go, I have something to say and God damn it, you're going to listen.
Yeah.
And so I said to this group of kids that what we do is challenge people's value system.
Yeah.
That's really important, right? Going back to that horrific story about that guy who jumped up in that play. His quote unquote value system was being challenged. We hope it goes a different way. We would want that guy to be a little enlightened, right?
Yeah.
But there's no there's no cure for ignorance and stupidity. But so here we are saying to people, you feel a certain way about something. We're here because possibly you should question whether or not what you believe in is valid. And maybe you've always believed in it and you never had the chance to be like, whoa, I'm a little older now or whatever, or I see it differently. So, I'm not saying that theater should be hot button issues, but they do cover human, artistic themes that are human. And you may or may not recognize that you've always believed something because you were told to believe it, or your family or your religion or something. And then suddenly you go, wait a minute, I'm my own person. And also that thing, it's never been presented to me that way.
Mm.
And now I'm seeing the other side of it, So again, I'm not saying like issues, we're not doing issues here. We're doing themes, we hope, So the other thing about why we think theater is so important is because it's ancient. Like you said, it's only a couple of million years old, There's never not been a culture that doesn't have some form of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a human thing to reflect yourself back to yourself, It's a human thing to go, I take in through the five senses, I see my world that I live in, and I want to understand it in some way, right? And so what do we do, right? We were saying before, boy, it's really stupid, isn't it, that we, act or quote unquote pretend, But that's like going up to a farmer and going, what do you do? You dig in the ground? What are you doing there? You dig in the dirt? That's what you do? No, I plant things that grow. And when those things grow, we pick them and then we feed the nation, we feed the world, we feed people. So we nourish, people are alive because of what we do, digging in the dirt, right? We plant things that grow and then people are nourished by it. So what do? We plant things that grow and people's souls are nourished by it, which you don't always see.
Right.
You can't always see somebody's soul being nourished. It's why whenever a certain government takes over, the first thing that they cut is always the arts
Yeah.
and culture, because they can't see it.
They don't see the immediate result.
Right. And then even when they try to hold on to art, they always have to talk about it in economic terms. Well, you build an art center and then all the businesses around it, restaurants and whatever. You go, oh, yeah, we have to sell art to you because of commerce.
Right.
Look at how many people will come and spend their money because they're going to see a show tonight or whatever, which is totally valid, by the way. But it's not why we do it, because when you think about it, you don't need a theater to do theater.
Can be done anywhere.
It could be done anywhere.
Doing a play that's in a park right now.
You are doing a play that's in a park.
Yeah.
That's right. All you got to do is say, I'll never forget reading Peter Brook. He goes, I tried to answer a letter. That's what it thought. Somebody wrote to him, Dear Mr. Brook, how do you become a director? He's like, Peter Brook was like, you get a play, and then you get a bunch of your friends together, and then you do it. Because nobody, when you're an actor, you go, how do I be an actor? Well, Jesus, you got to hope someone will let you be in a play. But to be a director is to be like, I got a script. I got people who I know are very talented. I'll do it in my freaking basement.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Peter Brook was also, for those who don't know, a very famous theater director, and has a great book called The Empty Space that you should read.
Yeah, and the empty space is huge for us. Again, I've said this before, that Carson and I and Will, we're in a company called the 1-1 Project, and we use quite literally the empty space as a term. It begins in a space that has nothing in it, and you have an actor or two actors who are dressed in black in a black room. You couldn't be more neutral, and it starts with an impulse between them. And it builds and builds and builds until you have this extraordinary experience for audience members to receive, and it all begins with an empty space. That's all you need to do theater.
In fact, I actually wrote to a pretty famous British actor once, and I asked him, "What do you recommend a young actor should read?" And his two books that he recommended were The Collected Works of William Shakespeare and The Empty Space.
Oh my God.
So it has some value.
All right, young people out there, that's your homework assignment, The Empty Space. So theater has always been. I don't think there's a culture that hasn't done it, or a continent. There's ancient examples in Africa, in Asia. We know in Europe, there are cave paintings in Europe, What are these cave paintings? They're depictions of the world, of whoever the artist was. They were responding to the sensual, what they take in, what they see and hear and feel and whatever. They depict it on the wall of a cave. Like, what impulse was that all about? And some of it's portraiture, right? It's just a still image. But some of it's pretty good. You go, like, that person caught like what an antelope or a horse looked like, whatever, back then, And at least two of these caves are in France, They're like from 20,000 years before the Common Era, right? So, to be simple, we are 2,025 years from the Common Era, and this is 20 or 40,000 years before that.
Right.
So we're talking about the Neolithic era or whatever. And I don't know, what's with France, though? Fucking... It figures it would be in France. It figures that some French cave guy with a beret.
You think they had those back then?
I believe that he had a beret, and I don't think cigarettes had been invented, so he probably had a stick.
Right.
And he just lit fire on the end of the stick, and he was like, I'm painting an antelope. Don't bother me. I only paint antelopes, how I see them. Some French freaking troglodyte. And then that would mean there would be the first art critic.
That's true.
It would have been French, too. Well, you call this an antelope?
That's
My
true.
3-year-old draws a better antelope than this. Those were the first. I don't know what's up with France, but now we've lost all of our French. You know how we have like 12 followers?
We've lost,
I think 3 of them were French, and so
probably.
we have 9 followers.
We have 9 followers.
That's probably we just got canceled by the nation of France. Anyway, what the fuck? So cave paintings, but here's what I wanted to say about it: that some of it's portraiture, right? But eventually, you start seeing like action, like hunting. Right, you see bow and arrow. You see like characters with bow and arrow hunting antelope or whatever, and so all of a sudden, it takes on a quality of storytelling, of action, It's not just somebody in a still image. It's like we're progressing. We're doing something, an action that results in an objective. It's early theater. And then we get that great story, my favorite story from Robert Edmund Jones' book, The Dramatic Imagination, where he talks about Ook the caveman. He goes, can you imagine the first actor, Ook? People would sit around the fire, and the people who went out to hunt would come back and tell the story of the hunt. We did this and we did that, and we saw a lion and we killed the lion, we brought it back. And then this is Robert Edmund Jones imagining. One day, Ook, the caveman, gets up, and instead of saying, I hunted he becomes the lion. He puts the pelt of the dead lion, he puts it on himself, and he is the lion. And then he imagines everybody sitting around the fire. They're all stunned. They're all like, holy shit. And Ook plays the lion, and then he sits back down again. But he's broken the rule. You can't be in the audience once you've been up there. But when he sits back down, he just describes it like all the other cave people are looking at him like, what the fuck shit happened? What was that, Ook? And then somebody goes, yeah, good old Ook, the man who could become a lion, And so you cross that line. Like once you get up there and you act a thing out, it's a bit shamanistic, You take on through empathy, you take on the understanding of that entity, that person or that lion or whatever. Once you sit back down, everybody's going to look at you a little bit differently. Like you're the one that can channel. You have the humanity to channel that.
It's actually kind of interesting because that still happens today. I never really thought about that, but when you're really good or you're a really iconic character, for the rest of your life, you're gonna, you're gonna be looked at like you're Ook the caveman.
Absolutely, man.
You can't help it.
No, and it's a bit of a danger, isn't it, for some actors? Like they get very well known in one part that they played and they can't shake it.
Right.
And then there are those actors who try to lose themselves in a part so that you can't ever recognize them on the street.
Right.
Whatever. Or, more and more, this is funny. I'm not sure if this is a topic for today's episode, but it kind of is. There's that wonderful dichotomy of actors that have to sell themselves, and so they're on social media. And then there are actors who are like, I took myself off social media because I don't want to be known. If I'm too well known, then when I play a part, people go, oh, there's so-and-so playing that part up there.
Yeah.
So I guess you get to a point, I guess that's the rub. You get to a point where you don't have to be on social media because people know who you are.
Exactly.
It's a bit of a luxury to be like, I don't have to have Instagram. Everyone knows who I am.
Right.
But if you don't, you're supposed to sell yourself. I hate this part of our work. I mean, I hope people listening have recognized by now. Our podcast, we never reference the industry or the business. It's not what we're talking about. This is not that podcast for how to get the job or how to audition or, remember to wear the same shirt. To the callback, so like they remember you from your fucking shirt. You know what I mean? Oh, there's that shirt. I reckon. I remember you're a good actor because you wore that shirt. That's not. I've never been in the industry. I don't know anything about it, quite frankly. I mean, I've directed a ton of things, but I don't know anything about the industry. So hopefully, this is we're speaking to actors here in the process of acting and the desire and the need to do it.
And the value.
And the value of it. It's so important. But isn't it crazy that most people don't, Carson, you're young and young actors, if you tell people you're an actor, do they just kind of patronize you? They just kind of smile? We go, oh, isn't that good? You don't even bring it up. Why?
It depends on where and who you're around.
I guess.
Yeah. Because every actor who's ever said that, the first thing that's going to come out of the person's mouth 99.9% of the time is, well, how do you memorize all those lines?
I almost
would I have seen you in anything?
Would I have seen you in anything? Yeah, that's another.
I almost spit out my throat coat tea. How do you remember all those lines? Like that's not even the hard job. That's just the job.
Yeah.
That is so rote. That's just the job. How do you memorize those lines?
My teacher, Karen, who we referenced in a previous episode, always said that's if someone came into class not memorized, she'd say that's the easiest part. If you can't do that,
Yeah.
You're up a creek.
I know some 5-year-olds that can memorize.
Yeah, yeah,
what I mean?
of course.
And so you get kind of patronized, like, oh, do you want to be in a Marvel movie? You want to be in a
Right.
superhero movie? Because that's all they know. And yet, if you do a film that really speaks to people, or even lately television, right? Last week we talked to Tom Pelfrey, and he was in Ozark, and he's been in quite a few television shows that are very, very. They shake you up a little bit.
Absolutely.
They make you think, and so that people go, oh, what a great actor! I really honor that, But Tom was also in a short-lived Marvel thing, Iron Fist.
Oh, yeah.
Tom was in Iron Fist. I don't think I ever told you this. One day I was sitting at a table at a diner with Tom and Brandon Flynn.
Okay.
And Brandon had just graduated like the year before, and he was in 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah.
And I'm eating with these two guys who are just my former students and my friends, and a young woman, girl, maybe 13 or 14, God bless her, had the courage to come up to the table, and she said, "Are you Brandon Flynn?" And he said, "Yeah." And she burst into tears. Because that show was very, very moving for a certain faction of our larger community. And Brandon, being Brandon, he's such a beautiful man. He got up out of the table. He got up from the booth and he stood with her. I think they hugged, and she said, "Your show stopped me from hurting myself. Your show's
Wow. Yeah.
It's huge." So I was so moved by it. And then we go back to eating our freaking hamburgers or whatever. And then a guy comes up and he goes, "Are you Tom Pelfrey?" Pelfrey goes, "Yeah." And then he goes, "I love you in that Iron Fist," or whatever. So they talked more about the joy of, whatever. And then I was like, I'm someone too,
I'm Kevin Kittle.
Nobody's stopping me.
But that's the value,
For me it is.
Yeah.
To not be known. That's huge.
So you're doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but that is a value, right? One person, again, this may or may not be apocryphal. It's attributed to Aristotle. What is the function of theater? To teach and to please. I think that's probably a little bit truncated, but to teach and to please, to edify, but also to entertain. There's nothing wrong with it. So one person comes up to Brandon and says, "I'm edified and deeply changed by the work you did." And another guy comes up to Tom and he's like, "Man, thank you." It's great to live through that, whatever that Iron Fist. I know, it's all the same to me.
Well, it reminds me.
All of my students are in those things. Sebastian is in all of those.
Yeah.
I've never seen a frame of any of those. That's not going to. Mike Coulter.
Mike Coulter, yeah.
Is in, was in.
Fury? Is it Fury? What's
No.
it called? Let's see.
He's great. He was not my student, by the way. He was at Rutgers. He was getting his MFA when I was teaching there. But we knew each other, and boy, oh boy, was he great, and still is.
Luke Cage.
Luke
He
Cage.
plays Luke Cage.
Luke Cage, Mike Coulter. Yeah, beautiful man. Anyway.
Well, that quote from Aristotle reminds me. There's this Tadashi Suzuki, the movement guy. He said there are two impulses in the theater: to be frivolous or to make rules.
Oh my God.
Which is a big thought,
That's amazing. I was told once that there are two impulses that lead to theater. One is to worship, and the other is play.
Yeah.
Fucking around.
Yeah.
To fuck around, to play.
And I mean, this is probably a whole other podcast, but Arthur Miller actually wrote a small essay on it, on politics and the art of acting. I think
You sent that to me once.
Yeah.
I remember
where
you
he
said
talks about how modern politics are a form of theater.
Wow.
Which is I mean, it does influence all aspects of
Absolutely.
society, even if you don't realize it.
It's another reason why you can't die.
Right.
Years and years and years, there have been people and groups that have tried to kill theater. It's literally been driven underground, literally made illegal, right? It shut down for times of the plague, when you couldn't meet you couldn't have a gathering of multiple people. But it never died. Even when it wasn't present, it wasn't dead. People were always doing it somehow. Even when it was literally outlawed, people would find a way to do it. They would, could you imagine today if you had to go? hide that you were doing, you know.
There was a group in New York during COVID that
Oh,
found a way to do it when you couldn't meet.
Yeah.
You know, it's always
oh my God, I'm saying imagine. It was only a few years
Yeah,
ago
yeah,
that
exactly.
we had a kind of our plague, you know. No, it's like imagine theater being that important that people would break certain societal rules in order to make it happen, you know. And I think going all the way back to, for us anyway, when I say us, I mean in the Western world, we go back to the Greeks, right? We go back to the Greeks who, my understanding is it was a civic responsibility to go to the theater. They would shut everything down for during festivals, and it was worship, a kind of worship, and because watching a play made you a better citizen, you had to go. People had to go to the theater, and you would leave feeling like, okay, I just kind of received a lesson on how to be a better member of society or whatever. You know, really important. You know, we use that term thespian. It comes from Thespis, who was the first. Originally, this is, you know, I hope not a dry history lesson, and most of you probably know this, but young people listening may not. That originally, it was a ritual of multiple people, you know, 50 to 100 or more people, who would just do what they call a dithyramb, right? It was just a kind of ritualistic thing for the gods. You know, all of us are doing the same thing and speaking it out loud, and it's a way of communing, but it's also a way of asking the gods to take care of you, you know. But, you know, the legend is that they would tell the story in third person. You know, Prometheus he stole fire, and so the gods tied him up to a rock or whatever. And then one day Thespis steps out and goes, "I am Prometheus," and everybody went, "Wait a minute, what?" That was a leap. That's an existential leap. You're not telling me about Prometheus. You're saying you are.
Yeah.
You know? And so there's your first actor, in the sense that somebody is claiming to be the thing. I was telling Carson the other day, many of you might know what I'm talking about. And if not, go to YouTube, man. A couple of weeks ago, Jack Black was on Saturday Night Live, and they did this for us, very funny sketch about the first play. And it's a very lame premise when you think about it. It's a pretty simple premise, and I'm sure it's been done before, but they played it very well. And all they did was take all of the conventions that we take for granted. And but what if it was the first play and you didn't know? So the people are sitting there watching it. Everything the actor said on stage, the people in the audience would be like, "What?" Like the guy came out and he was like, "I am King so-and-so." And Jack Black stands up, "Liar, you're no king. He's my next door neighbor." No, like, you're supposed to accept that what's happening up there. You're supposed to fall into the reality of it, but not if you're not told the rules.
Right. Yeah.
Every time one of the actors would point, "Look, here comes the army," behind them, and the audience would all turn behind them and go, "Where? I don't see any army." They took everything literally because they didn't understand this idea of we're enacting something, you know?
Yeah. It's funny because, I mean, that's a skit, but there's that very famous, when the first moving picture, whatever, and that train coming
Yes.
on the screen.
Yep.
People think it's actually, there's a train coming. They
People duck.
dart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
The Great Train Robbery. I think at the end of it, a guy points a gun at the camera and shoots it, and people in the audience were like, we're being
lost
shot.
their minds. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. So listen, this is how potent, you know, how potent theater is and how powerful it can be, you know? What else do we want to talk about, young Carson?
We wanted to talk about to teach theater.
Yes.
Or teaching
through theater.
Through theater. Yeah.
Well, to speak about the value of theater, theater can teach you, but one can also teach theater. Like I teach people the art of acting, right? Or I could teach about theater and the value of theater. But there's another element which I actually started doing before I started to teach at a conservatory, which is teaching through theater. Theater is a very potent and powerful tool for teaching. So, for instance, I had a theater company that would go into schools and colleges and communities. So, we would go to the community, temples and churches, this kind of stuff. And we would do plays that we wrote, devised plays that for 20 minutes or so would raise certain issues, but we wouldn't resolve them. So that when a conventional play ends, you go, and denouement, climax and denouement, and it's over. These would rise to the climax and then stop. And the audience would feel very frustrated, like, what the hell happens next? And this is the most pure form of theater. The actors would stay in character. They would continue to be the people who did the behavior in the play.
Right.
And then the audience would talk directly to them. I swear to you, no matter how old and no matter what socioeconomic background these people came from, geographically, where in the country they were, because we would travel, everybody would talk to the actors like they were the character. Nobody ever said, why am I engaging with you? You're just an actor. Because the actors were really good. Well, first of all, the ton of homework they did in order to be who they said they were, so that they couldn't get caught in not being who they are, right? But the people would talk like if you played one of the characters, they would say to you, why did you do that thing with that? And you would go, well, what do you think I should have done? Like you're trained to turn it back on them. So they have to work it through for themselves. Every great play should do that. But this is the purest way to do it. The purest way. So, this is just like, for instance, for middle school or whatever, we would do a thing on drugs and alcohol or whatever. And so then some kid would be like, I saw you didn't want to drink that beer. Why did you do it?
Right.
And then the kid would go, you think what should I have done? They're like, you should have said no to that kid. He was bullying you. All this, they're saying what they know. But that kid themselves, when they're in that situation, they might not do it. But they get to sound it out by telling you should do it. So I'm being a Pollyanna, but one would hope the next time that kid is actually in that situation, he'd be like, I did this already.
Yeah.
I did it with that other kid who's not even real.
Well, and it forces you to have an opinion.
It forces you to have an opinion and stand behind it.
Well, and that's why I always, when I hear there's a show up or a film and I hear really extreme conflicting opinions, I'm like, I should probably go see that then.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the point. It's making you think.
Yeah, one hopes. One hopes. You know what was funny about that company that I had? When I think about the political times, it was in the 80s and Nancy Reagan had her Just Say No campaign,
right,
which didn't work.
Yeah.
But the schools all received grants to have groups come in and do Just Say No, right? So they would hire us under the Just Say No money, and we would go in there and we would never tell them to just say no, because that we know, we knew to create pieces of theater that are extremely ambiguous. We know that there is no black and white; it's all gray.
Right.
So to stand in front of them and say, just say no, kids, they would just laugh and throw shit.
Yeah.
That to them.
But you're not teaching them.
You're not
anything at all.
Anything. So by doing a play that's open-ended like that, the audience would get so engaged, and they would just be like, and I'll never forget, at least once a show, some kid being very funny, some 13-year-old would raise their hand and say to your character, just say no. And everybody would burst out laughing because they all knew, what bullshit that was. But they really engaged and really, really appreciated that we would come in there and go, we're here to work stuff through. We're not here to be didactic. We're not here to tell you something. I've had multiple people when I used to do that work say, so then what's the answer? And I would say, what do you think the answer is? What do you feel the answer is? It's it's a forum and an opportunity, right? And so who are the people that we think of when we think of this kind of work? We think of Augusto Boal. We think of who did Theater of the Oppressed.
Right.
Right. We think of Dorothy Heathcote, who was very well known for going into schools with very, very young children and teaching and giving them the respect that they deserve. 10, 11, 12-year-old kids. And They would say, what's our play going to be about? And she said, what do you want it to be about? They would write their own play.
Wow.
And she would only be there to guide them through it, but they would say, this happens and then this happens. And she would question them beautifully. So here were kids learning civics lessons because they would be like, well, I'm in power, so I think everyone should go into jail. You know what I mean? And then she would be like, let's talk that one through.
Yeah.
How come you want everyone in jail? Well, I don't like what they said. Oh, so if they don't have your opinion, they should go to jail. Then you see the kids talking, well, you know, the kids changing their mind. They're changing their mind about their authoritarian impulses or whatever, you know, even as children. Who else? I told you about Viola Spolin, right? When I first was young and started training, she has all those wonderful theater games for the classroom and for young people. And what she would do is set up an environment and then get out of the way so that children could learn from the environment. Mm-hmm. They just put their hands on things and manipulate things and work off each other. Is it acting? Yeah, in the sense that they're in an imaginary circumstance.
Sure.
And that they're living through something. But Spolin never wanted to train great professional actors. She just wanted to work with lay people and children, you know. This is the last thing we'll talk about under this topic, which is our company that we've referenced. You know, Will and Carson and I are in a company called the 1-1 Project. And I think it kind of pulls together everything we've talked about up until now. In that we've gone so far in our thinking about theater that it's almost like we've come back, you and I mean, not us, not the world, me and you. We've gone so far in our thinking of theater that we've gone all the way backwards. Like we're a theater company that doesn't do plays, you know. Kid eating the kids. Is it even theater? It's a theatrical experience for the audience. But it's never going to be a play. People have asked me recently, a few people have said to me, what was the last thing you directed? You know, I'd be interested. And I was like, I haven't directed anything in years because I'm the artistic director of the 1-1 Project and I'm putting all of my energy into this.
Yeah.
And the irony of that is I'm the artistic director of the theater company, but I'm never going to direct them in a play. Right?
Yeah.
Because we are interested in the experience that the audience has from being live in that room with us. But what we don't give them is anything that an audience might expect when they go to the theater.
It's
Go ahead.
completely improvisational.
It's 100%. It's 100% improvisational, but it's not improv.
No.
You know what I mean? So nobody should show up thinking that we're going to be like, give us a suggestion for blah, blah, blah. We're not doing that.
Right.
There's no, you know, I was thinking about how I came to this, and the truth is, you know this. I don't really like theater that much. I'm not that, you know, I like it more than my wife, but I don't really go that much. I train actors for a living, but I'm not really that drawn to theater these days. The only time I go to the theater now is if one of my former students is in it, you know. Like a couple of weeks ago, I went to see Bus Stop. There's a production of Bus Stop
Right.
in the city right now, but because Midori Francis is in it. Midori was great in it. So I went to see the play because she was in it. It was a very good production, so I did see a good theater, but I only went because I was invited by my former student. I think lately I'm just not into conventional theater. You know what? I shouldn't say conventional because I don't mean that the theater is some of it is. Some theater is pretty damn conventional, but I don't mean conventional in a negative way. I mean traditional. And so what I'm interested in now and what our whole company is interested in is it's so purely experiential that the audience barely recognizes it as what we would call real life. Because when people say that the theater is supposed to replicate real life, we go, but that's pretty limited, isn't it? And pretty limiting. So if you come to a 1-1 event, we don't even call it a play, we call it an event. There's no rising action. There's no consistent and even recognizable relationship sometimes. There's no freaking circumstance. Every play has, the inciting incident, right? A circumstance. We don't have that. And especially weird, I think, for audiences is the actors are not playing characters who are pursuing an objective and playing actions in order to get the objective. That's what theater is. That's what a play is, but we're not doing that.
Right.
And the reasoning is that if the actors can be just pure experience, if they could just be the conduit through which experience flows, then we bump up to the wall of realism, and then we burst through that wall, and we're not even worldly, we're universal. So the audience recognizes universal experience and behavior up there. And how does this speak to our topic today of the value of theater or the purpose of theater, the significance in society of theater, right? And the function of theater. We're giving the audience, each individual member of the audience, an opportunity for their own subjective take on what was happening. You could have a completely different experience of it from the person sitting right next to you because nothing was fed to you, right? Why do we take away actions and objectives? Because if we see a character up there going after something, and we know what they're going after, that means they cut off all of the other possibilities. It's only about one thing. So our actors are trained to not curate the experience. They don't shape it. They don't curate it. They don't come from their own personal point of view because that's pretty limited, their personal point of view. So if they leave that out, then this universal feeling about what something is comes through. So can you imagine how pure that is in terms of theater? Everyone in the audience is having their own subjective experience. It lets them live through their associations coming from their lived experience.
Yeah. So in theater at its height is to be reflective, not, I guess, projective.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way of phrasing it. We're not telling them what to think or feel. We're not even telling them what this is about.
Right. It's your interpretation of it.
But the audience has to leave themselves alone, because if they come in with all their expectations, they're going to get frustrated because they're going to be like, what's this about? Looking for us to give them clues about what it's about. But when you let go of that, you go, it's about the experience I'm having because of this.
Yeah.
Because of what the company is doing, or what the company is not doing in terms of what you come to expect from going to a conventional theater experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've kind of gone back. In other words, we've gone so far ahead with theater that we've gone backwards. It's it uses what we call total theater, lights and sound and clothing and architecture, projections, the actor and the actor's physicality and their voice. But in terms of structure, it's just pure experience and behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a good time to say, people who are listening, don't be shy, write to us. meisnerpodcast@gmail.com. All right. Cool. Well, that's it for this episode. You have the rest of the day now, Carson, to go be foolish. Go do something stupid, like be in a play. We all know being in a play is stupid, so you might as well go do that.
Might as well do that.